And it is the fourth, I believe, festival of the Ghosts in the Gardens. And Julie's full of cold. I've had a cold that's of 4 weeks, so hope yours goes a bit quicker than mine. Starting today appropriately with a Roman soldier. I know the sun is rather bright, so I'm gonna kind of keep us moving. Really, what's kind of nice here, of course, with that light is we get a shadow, which you don't often get with the ghost. So kind of appropriately for York, of course, given that we credit the Romans with founding this fair city of ours, that the first ghost really here today is a Roman soldier. We can see him here stood with his characteristic shield, with the great metal boss in the middle, of course, and his helmet with the kind of cheek plate. So you haven't seen these ghosts before. They are. Sounds a bit quiet, does it? It shouldn't be. My microphone is not saying it's quiet, but do let me know if others are finding it the volume, and we can always stick another microphone on. But it does, doesn't it? He looks like he's been stalked by his own shadow, which is kind of interesting. So just give me a sense, if you would, about the volume. And so you see he's got the characteristic neck guard on the back. Hello, Dawn. Glad that you are on board. Sorry to hear you experienced trouble. So if you haven't experienced these, thanks, Sandy, in the past, really, they are a really kind of interesting sort of artistic concept insofar as it's kind of wire mesh, which, as you can see here, is layered up to sort of create this distinctive armoured look. Very much, obviously, redolent of the original kind of armour. So it's low here as well. So let's tell you what we'll do is we'll just bob on a second microphone, and maybe that will just help if the fault is with this microphone. But on the sound level, you see, I've got a sound meter down here because we are very much all mod cons. So if I put a second one on this side, not only will it hopefully get louder, we should be in stereo. And to be honest, it's not normally a complaint of mine of being too quiet. It's generally speaking, it's the other way round. So we'll just try and get that on. So put that on that side, and hopefully that will be a bit louder for you now. So in terms of sort of the ghosts themselves, the kind of an artistic idea is capturing, I suppose, a representation of York in the years gone by. And as York's kind of story starts with the Romans, it's appropriate for us to kind of start here, much later ago. And so consequently, we've got kind of ghosts, haven't we, as both this idea of, as people coming back from the dead, as you might say, spooks, haunting spirits, apparitions, but also this sense of the ghosts as what's been left behind, those that have lived here, that have left their stamp upon the city, have helped it to evolve, to develop. So because the Romans, of course, were talking about the foundation of the walls, the grid pattern of the streets. We're talking about kind of the way that we cross the river, the way we go from one side of the city to the other, the kind of the shape and dimension of the Minster and so forth. So they've very much left their stamp on it. So I think it's kind of interesting to think of ghosts as both kind of this idea of the apparitions, but also as placemakers that either through their architecture, through their conquest, through their kind of buildings, through their sort of cultural kind of pursuits and hobbies. Often, of course, we learn a lot through archaeology, from digging in the ground. Isn't it beautiful? Look at that beautiful blue sky. You really couldn't argue with this weather, could you? But of course, we are in the midst of Little Luke's Summer. And if you know what I'm talking about, I would encourage you to go back and find a tour from Hooton Pagnell when I talked all about St Luke's Little Summer, as well as explaining acres and furlongs and all that stuff. So if you want to know about St Luke's Little Summer, that's your place to go. But we are in the midst of it, and it's a period of lovely sunshine in the first few weeks of October. So the other way, of course, historically, that we kind of get this sense of ghosts is through art. And art has been the way, and if you think about it, before photography, art had a very, very kind of specific purpose, which was to capture likeness. And in many ways, once photography kind of came along, art was sort of left off the hook, wasn't it, really? It was given a different kind of role. It could start to be artistic, if you like, We could start to have impressions and ideas of things. We could start to be more kind of playful. But until photography comes along, its job really is kind of representation, isn't it? You know, the portrait, famously, of course, Henry VIII, wasn't he? With Anne of Cleves, the portrait that was rather too flattering. Then we've got Oliver Cromwell, the opposite. He wanted his portrait warts and all. And this one is a bit bashed. I don't quite know what's happened to this. I've seen one or two that are looking a little worse for wear. I think that, unfortunately, this year, with one or two of them are being very accessible, that enthusiastic children, or possibly drunks, who knows, are perhaps doing a little bit of shape-shifting. But we can see down here, we've got the artist. He's got his palette down there. And as we come up, Monsieur l'Artiste is wearing his rather voluminous beret. He's got a cravat about his neck. And what's nice, again, if you're not kind of familiar or you haven't kind of seen these for a while, is the way that the metal, unfortunately, we should say this one's a little bit bent, can do different things depending on our proximity to it, depending on how the light catches it, depending what's behind it, that it can appear both solid but also kind of ephemeral. So as we move, the way that we experience the sadistic children and drunks, yeah, I mean, that sounds like, you know, an afternoon in New York, to be honest, sadistic drunks and children. So yeah, I think that's kind of what's been going on here. What's nice, of course, is that even though this one isn't new, last year it was up there. It was right over there on top of the balconies. You couldn't actually get to it. So what's kind of nice is that I think there's about 20 new ones this year. So there's a mix today in today's tour. There's 60 altogether that we're going to see of old ones and new ones, but in different positions. And so some like this that we've seen before, we've only seen from a distance, and others that we've seen up close before are now at a distance. So consequently, they'll move around. So I think it's kind of interesting that, you know, if we think about kind of history and historical representation and the ideas about history, artists have played a huge kind of role within that, particularly obviously the Romantics, who came here, you know, kind of en masse in the early years of the 19th century, kind of captivated by York's kind of beauty, but also its kind of ruins. The fact that there was this kind of largely unspoiled, albeit falling to pieces, medieval city with kind of Roman ruins and medieval kind of remains. And so they got to kind of play out their Arthurian fantasies, you know, kind of running around with wimples and the like. I think Marlena would have liked it here in those days, kind of dressing up, having fun, and probably lots of kind of rolls in the hay to kind of celebrate, you know, an afternoon's kind of playfulness. So, of course, this is not, you know, the Lowestock. They're too busy working. But for those that had this life of leisure, this life of luxury, and not only had to worry about what they were going to do that day, the idea of kind of dressing up and kind of hanging out and being Maid Marian or Guinevere down the museum gardens in York and being painted while you're at it, you know, was a kind of pretty funky thing to do for its time. So Monsieur l'Artiste could be sure of a few kind of commissions on those. People like to be painted in their kind of historical settings. So enough of that. Hello, Laurie. And let's go off and find something new. So I'm trying to get it through about 20 today. There's 60 altogether, so that means we need 3 tours to cover them all. And the way I rabbit, if I can get through 20 in an hour, I'll have done very, very well. That's nice to hear, Judy. It's nice to see family, albeit infrequently. Sometimes it's nice seeing him infrequently, actually. You see him a lot. You kind of wish it was the other way. But yes, a beautiful day. You know, let me just take a sip of my water. And we'll go to Edible Gardens, and we'll see, I think there's 3 in here, that we will go and seek out. Excuse me, may I just get through there? Thank you very much. So one of them, I know, is down here, the Edible Garden. So we were talking about the kind of the lives of leisure, as you might say. But of course, to enable the leisured class to be able to spend the afternoon dressing up and playing a la kind of Marie Antoinette and her ilk, you know, of course, there was an army of labourers who were preferably unseen, but not always the case when you were a gardener, because obviously there was a good deal of work to do. So I'm really kind of pleased that the gardener is in here. I'll talk about gardening in a minute in the more general and kind of the setting where we are. But I think it's fascinating that, you know, we get to the 18th century period and 19th century, you know, where these gardens are kind of being laid out, and so the grand age of kind of wealth is this idea that you can change the world. If you don't like the particular landscape, you've got to change it. create gardens, create rivers, create bridges, create valleys, create woodlands. That if sort of previous centuries have been more about kind of personal piety and kind of, worshipping God through kind of, what's already there, in this was this idea of creating perfection on earth rather than perfection in the next life by creating what you wanted. So the great landed estates, the great kind of gardeners. So the gardeners played a huge role in kind of transforming, backbreaking work, of course, but played a huge role in transforming these gardens. Have they done the buttons? They certainly have done buttons, Judy. So we can just get a little cross weave. So again, up close, they don't look much like it, but pull it from a distance. And again, so you've got this thing up close, not far away, but pull back. And again, we get these kind of different perspectives. And again, you get this, particularly with the face, I think it's very, very interesting. The closer you get, they become ephemeral. You can't really see them too much, but pull away, and actually, before you know it, not only do you get more definition, you start to get very human forms of expression, which I find kind of utterly beguiling, kind of fascinating. And we have seen this guy before, but it's lovely to see them again. Must get a flat cap, absolutely, for working in the garden. I'm guessing that by his dress sense, he's going to be a Victorian chap. But as I say, let's never underestimate the sheer grunt work that it took of manual labour to make this happen. So let's move on. Let's go and see our next ghost. Hope you are enjoying today's tour. Plenty to cover and plenty to kind of get around. So we don't want to dwell too long on any one individual one. Otherwise, I'm never ever going to get through them today. And I've set myself a target to try and get us to see 20 in this hour. And so we'll see where we go. So this time, an archbishop. You'll see his crozier there and his mitre. So, of course, York has had an archbishop for over 1,000 years. William the Conqueror appointing his mate Odo, of course, back in the second half of the 11th century. But it had bishops going back a good deal longer, all the way up to the 7th century. Paulinus, of course, the first who first consecrated the Minster, which was built about 500 yards away from where we are now. 66 is no age, into your prime. So, of course, distinctively with the archbishop, with the bishop of the crozier, which is the shepherd's crook. And that's very deliberate, of course. All those references to sheep in the Bible and flocks. This idea, that a pastor, which also somebody who looks after pasture, is somebody who looks after the animals and rounds them all up, the stray sheep. And it's the wandering sheep, isn't it? The prodigal son, the one that wanders away and is brought back, that is more valued than the one that stays, which is a bit harsh, isn't it, really, in terms of the kind of message there. So do what you like and you kind of get treated better than those that kind of apply the discipline. But nonetheless, this sort of symbol of bringing back the lost sheep is kind of very powerful within the church. And the mitre, by the way, was high and pointed, so it could be distinguished from the hats that the Jews were made to wear. So in case you ever wondered why they wore the distinctive hat, it was to make it clear from a distance they were in fact not Anglican, that they were a Christian and not a Jew. So of course the archbishops have defined York in many respects. We've got the Minster, of course, which again is probably 2 or 3 minutes walk away from where we are now, which is the seat of the Archbishop of York. And there are but 2 archbishops in the country, one here in York and one of Canterbury. So they, of course, would have been the original cardinals of the Catholic Church. Well, Henry VIII pulled us away from the kind of Catholic Church and absolutely gathered the flock together. And as I say, get the strays back, get us to come in. Got Episcopal cross on his middle. So he's kind of rather grand. And again, we've got some nice kind of 3D relief in terms of the buttons here on the coat. And again, hopefully you can see what I mean. By coming up close, we've got very little definition by way of expression. And once we come in a little bit, hopefully you get a bit more. Just come from this side so we can get a sense. Oops. So quite interesting what I was saying before, obviously, about the, what's behind them defined. So in this case, obviously, we've got the green leaves. It's very, very different from, obviously, when we've got something where the light is kind of shining through. So it really is one of the interesting things about these kind of white sculptures is their setting defines the experience, as does your location, as does time of the day, as does the weather. So it isn't a case of saying, I've seen it. What you've seen it is you've seen it as it is right now today at 4:15 on a Saturday afternoon in the sunshine. It could look very, very difficult, different on a Tuesday in the rain. So it's kind of interesting. Now over here is one that I know has proved to be one of people's favourites in years gone by. And it's probably one of the few that seems to have found its permanent home here, and it doesn't seem to move. So popular was it that I used it as this year's image. So there's kind of no surprise with plot spoilers, you've already kind of seen this one. But there's something incredibly powerful about the Kneeling Knight. And the Knight, of course, brings to mind this idea of the conquest, the Crusades, which are very much kind of being used again right now in a way that I think is incredibly unhelpful for those that are seeking to divide and create division within society, are looking to this form of military Christian history as a justification for believing that war against Islam or persecution of Islam is appropriate. To people that believe that, I'd say go and read your history, because for the most part the Crusades were pretty much a disaster. They achieved very, very little, and for the most part they secured handing over what was known as Christendom to Islamic control for centuries, till to this day. So that's how successful the Crusades were. But of course you can dress things up any way that you like. What's kind of interesting, of course, with the prayer is the location. I know I've kind of talked about this before, but for those that haven't sort of seen this in previous years, you've got a really interesting idea when the idea comes to the Holy Warrior. And you can see here is his facial protection there forms the cross. And again, it's lovely we get the bamboo through. But also, so a rice mesh. Yeah? We've also got the sword, the hilt there, and the handle is creating for us a cross. So he's very much a Christian knight. But of course, you've got a problem, haven't you? Which is that pesky commandment, thou shalt not kill. So how do you square that? How do you go away and be a soldier for Christ when you're not allowed to kill? Well, the answer to that is you get indulgences. They ruined the Library of Alexandria. They absolutely did. They trashed Jerusalem, Acre. I mean, whatever they touched turned into absolute forex, as you might say. Do you know what I mean? It was a disastrous thing. It didn't work. And most of them went over there, caught the plague and horrible illnesses, and it was kind of valiant but foolhardy. And to have it now sort of portrayed as something that is a proud moment in history is just daft. But anyway, the people grab hold of any bit of history that serves their cause. So we do have yellow leaves. Yeah, absolutely. What the bamboo here, while puri. So we're coming into autumn. So of course, as the trees stop producing chlorophyll, the plants, then of course the green stops being produced. So we get this array which you can see in the gardens. So yeah, so we've got this problem. You can't kill. So how did they get around this? Well, what they did was that they had monks to pray for them. And so your penance for going off and killing might be that you've got to kind of go and say 15,000 prayers. That's a problem. It might take you, kind of the rest of your life to do that. But if you get monks to do that prayer for you on your behalf, then it can be done in no time. So consequently, this is the kind of the commodification of prayer. And this is what became a problem for the abbeys, and we're sort of walking to Abbey Gardens. And I did mention about gardens, so the Gardener. This area known as the edible gardens is a reminder of the monks' roles as herbalists and botanists, and everything in here that's grown would have been grown at one time by the monks, either because it's soft fruit, see over here, soft fruit vines, or we've got various herbs, various elements that were used for treatments, various flowers. You see it in front of us. I think this is echinacea. That's not echinacea, is it? But we've got various plants and flowers, rose hips, hops involved in kind of beer making, chamomile, of course, there was a treatment. So we've got absolutely. Do they absolve us by confession? Well, if we talk about if we talk about the knights, then yeah, of course they do penance. So you'd be awarded a kind of penance, which is basically this is the price that you've got to do. I mean, William the Conqueror, his penance for the Battle of Hastings and the harrowing of the North was somewhere in the region of 200,000, prayers you had to do. So it was a lot easier to come and found this abbey over here with monks that could pray all the time for his soul. And they got through it in about 25 years. So, by the time he died, hopefully, or from his point of view, hopefully, he was kind of good to go for his kind of place in heaven. But yeah, what's kind of fascinating about that then is you get, as I say, this idea of commodification of prayer, where what starts off as being monasteries as places of seclusion, of kind of pulling away from society, suddenly, particularly these ones here that are in the sort of centre of a city, they become very, very busy places, because in this period of time, okay, the Middle Ages, everybody is desperately keen to, well, desperately keen, everybody's entire focus, particularly the wealthy, is that the purpose of this life is to attain salvation in the next. So consequently, you've got this whole industry that is built up around saving souls. This is the business of saving souls. Thank you, Walpurgi. That's always nice that you can learn new words. Language is the best tool that we have, isn't it? And I think used well, it's like a musical instrument. There's no reason why we can't use language as creatively as we should. So you've got this industry of prayer. So consequently, the monasteries become these kind of repositories, if you like, where the output, the product, if you like, is prayer. And of course, prayer leading to salvation. So, at the sort of period of time before the Reformation, somewhere up to 1 in 4 people in some way, shape or form would have been associated with these holy houses. Now, a lot of them would have been workers or lay brothers. They wouldn't have been actually been, in clerical orders, but nonetheless as employers and people that were supplying them, people that were kind of associated with them, people that were kind of farming, that were perhaps working there, helping them in terms of laundering, and not money, that's clothing, obviously, kind of producing, looking after livestock, producing cheese, making honey, etc., etc. There was lots of these ancillary trades. But of course, the main element was prayer. And so here we have a monk in his hood. And we know that this abbey behind us was a Benedictine, which means that they followed the rules of St. Benedict. St. Benedict was a 6th century Italian monk who basically wrote the code. St. Benedict, by the way, in case you don't know, was such he was a hermit, but he was seen as so holy that people were drawn to him like a magnet. They'd come and ask his advice all the time, which is a bit of a nuisance if you're a hermit. I mean, they made fun of it a bit in The Life of Brian, the hermit in the desert. Same sort of thing, whereby he's constantly getting pestered by people who believe that he's got this kind of hotline to God. So can you give me this advice, as you might say. So in order to kind of get away from this problem, he came up with a really neat solution, which is to basically build a series of abbeys. And so he created these abbeys, these monastic orders, and gave them these rules, which was basically take these rules, go and find that abbey, go away and leave me alone. So it's the kind of the greatest act of kind of, antisocial behaviour in history, created monasticism. But Benedictine monks then were still following these rules. But actually they were sort of seen as kind of fairly and surprisingly lax by later the Cistercians, by comparison, this kind of French order that became very popular in France and then came to dominate England, particularly the north of England. They felt the Benedictines were very, very kind of lax in their observance. So it's haunting, and I'm trying to use this one now. We've got different lights, so I'm trying to give you a kind of circling round. And his mouth's open, so he's presumably he's probably chanting, but he's got his hands in his cowl there. So I'm just going to pull back. We're going to take a sip of water and just let you drink that one in. So we're in the graveyard of St. Olave's Church, which is behind us. And St. Olave's Church was the wellspring. This was the original monastic church that basically outgrew itself, and so consequently they built the Abbey, which is behind us. We've got Abbey ruins. We're on the other side. Normally we see the Abbey ruins from the other side. Today we're seeing from this side. Had you been watching, what do you call it? Maria, what do you call Maria? Not the Singing Nun. What's that called? Well, Sound of Music. Sound of Music, Cheryl. Did you go see Sound of Music? I thought, I'll be a nun. Because, of course, you know, she's a nun that leaves, isn't she? So we talked about all these people in the kind of ancillary occupations. So, of course, the monasteries were sort of living communities insofar as, obviously, there was people that lived in them, they needed to eat. But also they were charitable houses insofar as they provided, I guess, what today we would think of as kind of food banks and so forth. So it was their role before really there was any form of kind of meaningful government or any form of kind of meaningful charity. Charity, of course, is a church thing, is it looking after the poor? And so over here we have, I think we saw him, not last year, but the year before, this guy that I love, who is a beekeeper. And we've got a medieval beekeeper. So, of course, he doesn't have anything like the same protection that you'd expect in the modern era. What he does have is a wonderful array of bees. So isn't that just something? And, of course, it sort of does two things, really. The wire here, the wires that obviously connect the bees, but also kind of suggest the flight path as well, which I think is just amazing. I absolutely love the beekeeper and his bees. He's definitely right up there in one of my favourites. My cat was squirrel. So do let me know what you think of the beekeeper. So yeah, of course, beekeepers making honey. Bees famously make only about a teaspoon of honey, don't they? Actually, in the lights. And of course, it's not by chance, by the way, that he's here. If you actually look behind, you will see there are some hives over there. We'll not come near and disturb them, but this is a honey-producing churchyard. So they do produce honey and give it out, I think, to the local community, food bank and so forth. So it's very delightful, isn't it? I mean, I think the bees are slightly bigger than they would be in the flesh, as you might say. But as I say, let's pull back again. So Susan wants to go at creating the figures. Well, so you should, Susan. And obviously, I've never seen it. It's one of my ambitions, really, to be able to go and do a tour, sort of midway through the year, to go and see them being made. I don't know how they do it. I'm assuming they must use some form of internal structure to hold them all together. But I don't know. So I'm going to try and find out and try. Oh, some bees on here as well. It's one of my favourites as well. So again, close up, far away, we see different detail. And again, if we see, look, his head there with the railings behind, we don't see so much. But if we come in and we get a more solid background, it changes. So as I say, I think it's a really satisfying art form. That's the term I'm going to use. There's no real facial definition, by the way, in this one, because obviously he's wearing a mask. But I find it a very, very satisfying form of 3D art that I think kind of works beautifully. And as I say, we've got this double thing going on, haven't we? We've got ghosts, as in coming towards Halloween, so we can think about kind of, you know, ghosts and apparitions. And of course, being in a graveyard is an appropriate kind of part. But also thinking about this city that we're in, like so many cities, has got, you know, millennia of history. That whatever we do and wherever we are, we're simply building upon the people that have been here before. So I find that kind of fascinating. So I think that we will. John's English is a Yorkshireman, Emmerdale. Well, speaking of Emmerdale, well, yes, it is. We're not too far away from Emmerdale over here, probably about 35 miles away. So let us walk on. Excuse me. Thank you very much. And we'll go into the gardens proper. So what are we? We're halfway through. And I bet we're nowhere near. How many have we seen? Have we seen 10? Because I was kind of trying to target that one. But I like that one a lot. So yes, so we're going to go into the garden proper now. And which way we'll go? I think we'll go. I'll tell you what, we'll try and go this way. And I think there are some up here. Just get a view of that, because it is looking so lovely. against the blue sky. It's always worth posing, taking a moment, and just looking out because I haven't as yet seen them all. As I say, that apparently there are 60 this year. So I'm sure you'll understand when I say it's not necessarily a 2-minute job finding every single one of them. And so I'll tell you what, we'll go over there and see this one because this one is new, and it is a beautiful ruin. So I'll give you a shot of the ruins as we pan across, and I'm going to take you to see one that I think is super fun. And I missed it. Where is this? We're in the churchyard of St Olave's Church. St Olave's Church. St Olaf being the patron saint of Norway, and it was a church that is dedicated to St Olaf, who was the king of Norway, and Earl Seawood, who's a character in Macbeth, no less, is buried under the altar there. So it's got a lot of provenance. So hold that thought as regards Peacock's-Horn. But right now, we have something very different, and now something completely different, as Monty Python were wont to say. So this is, I'd say it's fabulous, really. I am absolutely in awe of it. It's brand new for this year, and this chap, if you look at it here, is it just me, or does he appear to have a beard? Which I think is really, really clever. So if I just try and pull in, let me know if you can see it, or if it's just me that is. Let's give it a little bit of zoom and see if it makes a difference. But to me, he looks like he's got a beard, which is really, really impressive. Hi, Linda. Late in the day, but welcome as ever. Man, well, it's not a unicycle, Linda. It's a penny farthing, isn't it? Interesting. For a fun fact about penny farthing. So, penny farthing, of course, for those that aren't from these shores, I don't really know, we'll call penny and a farthing because the front wheel, of course, much larger than the small wheel. So, the two coins, a penny, 1p, like a cent, and a farthing, a quarter of 1 penny, much smaller. So, that's what they were called. But it was almost right at the end of their use that they were given the name penny farthing. They were just called bicycles during their time. Yeah, beard and moustache, yeah. So consequently, we think, oh, the penny farthing, but it's really kind of after the fact they were called the penny farthing. It's how we describe them in history, rather than how people describe them at the time. And of course, the penny farthing, or the bicycle, as they would have called it at the time, was a kind of real revolutionary breakthrough in cycling because it brought this new fascination with speed and with racing. So cycle racing starts here, and by God, there were some accidents. You know, you kind of really did need to be a kind of full of daring do, as you might say, to race a penny farthing because the roads weren't great. You had not a lot of stability. There's no brakes, and if you fell, there's nothing really to get us up. Yes, I know Steve Sefan did have a go, didn't he? But doing this at speed is not for the faint-hearted. So, but it's this idea of the men of leisure, isn't it? You know, they've got basically nothing else to do than to kind of seek thrills and have fun. But it is absolutely delightful. So, yes, cycling, which of course is a huge thing in York. We're very fortunate, we're very flat. We've got a strong history of kind of cycle racing here. We've got the Tour de France through here, Tour of Britain, the Tour of Yorkshire, and so you see his moustache there, kind of goatee little beard, which I think is fabulous. I don't think I've ever seen one with a beard before. But I absolutely love him. And we've got a bit more of an idea of his frame in this one, if you look. So you can see, if you see running up the legs, we've got sort of something of a structure. So yeah, so this is kind of, as I say, this is the beginnings of this fascination with racing. And of course, it's before you've kind of got motor vehicles, 1860s, 1870s, at the very, very beginnings of the kind of combustion engine. So really one of the first forms, you know, of road racing was actually bicycle racing, like this chap here. So I like him a lot. He's brand new for 2025, and I think he is fabulous. But let's push on. And as ever, time is our enemy. So what do we think? Are we feeling that the man of what you've seen so far? Let me know which is your favourite. I know that the knight, as ever, has his fans. The beekeeper, the penny farthing man. We are, as ever, spoilt for choice. But do let me know which has been your favourite so far. Oh, one of the ones I haven't mentioned yet. Or perhaps it's going to be one of the ones we haven't even seen yet. Which would be fabulous, wouldn't it? As politicians like to tell us, the best is yet to come, whether we're convinced or not. I guess we'll come down to our kind of individual disposition. But I'd like to say maybe the best is yet to come on this tour. Who knows? So for Mitzi, it's the beekeeper. And are you a fan of honey, Mitzi? Haven't seen your favourite yet, says Tish. Tish's keeping an open mind, which is great. We like that. And now this lady I think we've seen before. Not that lady, that was, but this lady here that is made of wire. Lynn likes the beekeepers on. I think last year, she was in the Merchant Adventurers. No, was she in the Merchant Tailors? But they've done a fabulous job rendering for us the violin. Or maybe the viola. How do you tell the difference? Is it a size? The viola's bigger. I'm never really entirely clear. But I love the look on this lady's face. She seems to have a real sense of peace about her. She is obviously kind of lost in the moment or at one with the music. And of course, what's interesting, of course, is probably very much judging by her fashion, kind of a late Victorian, Edwardian. Kind of tell that because the skirt isn't as voluminous as it might have been in decades gone by. So whilst kind of gentlemen are finding their pursuits in the kind of the daring do and the daredevils of the penny farthing, women of that social class at a time when the hands are much more likely to find themselves being put to kind of cultural pursuits, more genteel occupations. Because of course the women don't do either. The servants would be running around doing all the jobs for them. But they would in turn kind of learn to play musical instruments or embroider or perhaps to sing like opera. All these kind of things. So, kind of got different ideas, but it's all based on the same thing, isn't it? It's people that don't really need to work. And I'm not making a kind of class point there, it's just the economics of the Victorian era was you either had money and servants or you served people that had. And there isn't really much, well, you're a manufacturer, but there wasn't much in between. You kind of got sort of two kind of classes. So the violin has become runny, so it just goes to show we are nothing if not fluid on this tour. And let's come in on this side so we can see, again, the way that the violin, and I love just that, look at that, the way that the light just changed, her body just appears to change as we kind of come round. I love this idea of it just changing according to what the backdrop is. I find it such a satisfying artwork in that point of view. But again, it's a really nicely done job. The curves of the violin, the bridge there. I think it's a bridge, is that right? The strings that we can see going across. The bow not quite as successful, perhaps, but also, the man-made now becoming increasingly organic as we see that the trees are beginning to lose and discard their kind of matter. So consequently, we're now seeing all bits of organic matter caught up and kind of trapped. So it's fascinating, isn't it, that when you put in a wholly alien, a wholly sort of creator sculpture into a space like this, inevitably it starts to take on board elements of the natural environment, which is pretty cool. So I'm not pushing on because I couldn't stay there longer, but merely I'm worried these gates are going to close, and I want to show you something down here that we haven't seen before. And we may have to walk out and around. We've been locked in here before. Wouldn't be the first time. And I could do without it today. So let us try. So we're going down towards the Anglian Tower. And I believe this is the first time they've put a ghost down here. And this may well be a contender for a favourite. Could be a contender for a favourite. Now, as is my wont, I try and interpret these things for you in terms of being, I suppose, a bit of a gatekeeper of York's history, thinking how might these sculptures fit in, what do they kind of relate to, how does it kind of fit within the overall narrative of York. And this one is not entirely clear. But I've got a kind of supposition for you. I'm glad to see women represented, because here is another woman. She's inside the Anglian Tower. I think we'll look at her from two sides. So we'll look at her from this side first, and then we'll go around to the front to reveal more truth. Like cameras never lie, but of course they do. Cameras show you what the photographer wants you to see. So looking at it from this side, we see a really sort of fairly ephemeral presence of the lady. She's nothing really other than a shape, a sculpture. We can't really read too much from this, other than, of course, she is within the Anglian Tower. So she's locked in. So is that merely a security provision? Is it just because the gate's always locked? Or is there something else at play? And Marlena's instinct is right on the money. Because if we come in and we have a look, the shackles that bind her give us an altogether different perspective. So perspectives, as I say on these things, are not just simply, it's where you stood. It's kind of the angle that you can stood at. So why would we have a woman kind of locked up in a stone room? Well, it's possible that it could be just relating to women in prison. It could be the female prisoners of the Castle Museum. Or it could be relating to, of course, a very, very famous spectre, a ghost from nearby here, the Grey Lady of the Theatre Royal. And without going into kind of full Halloween mode, for those that recall, there's various versions of the story of the Grey Lady, but almost all of them agree that she was a nun, and that for some reason she was sentenced to be walled up alive within the convent. And the convent, of course, sits on the site where the Theatre Royal is today. So why was she locked up? Well, again, various stories, various ideas. One is that she had this visitation by an angel who came down and told her things, a bit like Joan of Arc, that came to her in her dreams and kind of told her. And that the abbot felt, that the lady abbess felt that she was such a threat that this slip of a girl was moved away, was hidden away, so she couldn't be a threat to her leadership of the abbey. So that's one version of the story. The other, and the kind of more told, particularly by kind of ghost storytellers, who of course will tell this story on the streets of York night after night. And I'm not going to go into the full story because I'm going to probably save it for New Year, but not New Year, for Halloween. But the other, perhaps more compelling or the more oft used version of this story is that she fell prey to the sins of the flesh. She became pregnant by a local man, and he got away scot-free, as men do, free pass, whereas she, of course, was condemned by her sisters, was walled up and left to die. A painful, lonely, isolating death. So maybe it is the source of the story of the Grey Lady. Who knows? It could be, as I say, relating to the female prison at the Castle Museum. It could be simply the history of prisoners and female prisoners in the city. But I like it. And ephemeral is of it. So if we look in, we'll see that she's got a headscarf on. The head is covered. It's very subtle. Very little, by the way, kind of features. But very, very satisfying indeed. But time marches on. So let us move on to the next, because there's always more to see. Marlene loves that one. Well, who can blame you? It's fantastic, isn't it? And they're pretty cold in there as well. Not a nice place to be interred. But lots of stories about people being kind of bricked up. It was it seems like a very extreme, but also very impractical. I mean, how many people can you brick up before your house becomes too small? For instance, you kind of writing off an entire room to kill somebody, which seems, if you're going to kill somebody, it seems to be more practical and easy ways of doing it than that. But I'm not advocating capital punishment. I'm completely against capital punishment. But if you are going to kill somebody, walling them up seems a rather extravagant way of doing it. But as we're talking about people that had to face pretty nasty forms of death, the gentleman that we're about to encounter is somebody who was sentenced to the very worst the judicial system could throw at him. And that man, of course, well, you're going to know in a second who that is. He's one of York's most famous, infamous, there's a difference between famous and infamous sons, associated, of course, with Lose your confidence, absolutely, Dawn. It's a bit extravagant, I think. 17th century figure. We've got bags saying gunpowder. So I guess that most of you will have a sense that we are talking, of course, about Mr. Guy Fawkes, or Guido Fawkes, as they called him. A bit pretentious, really, Guido. He wasn't called Guido, he was called Guy. But when he was fighting against the Netherlands on behalf of the Spanish forces, he calls himself Guido to sound more Spanish. It's a bit of affectation. But we see that he has a broad brim hat, and coming back a little bit, he has the kind of gauntlets, and he has the look of a rather portly gentleman. So I don't remember him being quite so portly. And not terribly tall, but he is definitely a representation of Guy Fawkes. And yeah, I think you can tell by the hat of the sort of century that we're in, and we've kind of got the sash around the waist. The light isn't especially good in here, so you may be kind of losing some of the detail. And well, we've still got only 15 minutes to go, so I think we will leave Mr. Fawkes, no doubt come back to his story just a few weeks from now, because we are November the 5th, not far away from that, are we? So let's go back into the gardens and see how many more of these sculptures that we can see in the time that we have available. So I think what we might do, I can't go that way, they'll lock the gates. So we'll go back this way, and we'll start at the top. Yeah, it is, but the light wasn't great in there, Marlene. So as I was pulling back, he was sort of just blending into the kind of back wall. So obviously, as I say, the time of day and the light is definitely a factor in how you kind of perceive not only what's there, but also what your imagination adds. I mean, I think an awful lot of what we see here is a little bit of power suggestion. I'll say, can you see that? And, you know, to a degree, the very fact that I've said, can you see that? Some of you, it would suggest an experiment, will begin to see it not because you hadn't necessarily had before, but because I've said, can you see that? And because we're social animals and we like to please, our brains will say, yeah, didn't make much sense out of that, but now you said it, yeah, okay, maybe it is that. It's the kind of factor of sort of social behaviour. So, back the way we came. Thought we could get out the other gate, but we can't because that's locked. So here's the lady with the violin. Once more, and now we'll go. And if I remember where it is, I saw it the other day. I think the smallest one that they've ever done is just around this corner, and hopefully you won't be afraid when you see it, because despite the fact that it is very, very small, it is it's something that seems to cause panic and consternation amongst a lot of people for reasons that I can't adequately explain. I guess it could be the speed they move at, the fact they're very small, they can get into tiny little nooks and crannies. Maybe it's some or all of those things. But you probably guess what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a mouse. So I'd like you to look at, I'm just coming over here, but we probably need to on the other side to see it. It's somewhere in this tree. So do keep them peeled. We're looking for a little mouse, and there's no prizes as such, but there is pride of being able to spot. I can see him now. Just cast him over, keep those folks off the video, and we might just need a little bit of zoom, and I think the grey backdrop there. In fact, just turn around if I can get it. Ah, there we are. That's better. Can you see? Hopefully. So, hopefully we've got nobody on here that is terrified of mice, of mouses. Mice, isn't it? A mouse or mice. If so, look away now. But I think it's super cute. It's absolutely delightful. It's the smallest one that I've seen. It's certainly the smallest one that I've found. So that might be a sort of slightly different thing. Is it not? So there may have been previously smaller ones around, but I think that's definitely the smallest one that I found. So have we got anybody on here that that is worried or scared of mice? Do kind of let me know if that's the case. I'll try not to dwell too long, but I think that he is super cute, so well done. And when we think about the sort of comparative scale of the guy on the penny farthing, or we're not going to see it today, but we will in the future tour. The Highway and his horse. If you think about it, so I'm on such zoom, it's hard to hold still. To think you can do the same thing on this kind of micro scale is absolutely delightful. But as I say, I'm right up on zoom, so I'm going to zoom back out again. But yeah, it is a great tree. So hopefully now you can see him. You should be able to keep him in the centre of the picture. Midge the mouse. I don't know, Midge. Mary Mungo and Midge. Yes, I remember that. I remember that, Dawn. TV show. They used to go up and down the elevator, didn't they? Lived in a tower block. So there we go. Let's go. Aha. Now, another one we saw last year, but is back. And I think he's in a proper location this time for reasons I'm about to explain. And it is a bird. It is a majestic bird. It is one of the most majestic of all birds. And it has got a particular relationship to these very gardens that we're in. And that is, of course, the peacock. So there we have the peacock. And, of course, peacocks are always males. So if you're a lady one, it's a peahen. But you would never mistake a peahen for a peacock, for the simple reason that in nature, as is so often, it is the male that has the great coloration. So unlike the human species, where ladies might dress up in colours and makeup and this, that, and the other, and colour their hair, in nature it's almost always the other way. It's the male, and it's obviously a sign of their virility and their good breeding stock. So the bigger and the brighter and the bluer the feathers are, the more they are seen as a desirable match. And of course, if you ever heard them, they are incredibly noisy indeed. And up to, I think, 2001, and for those that are local, or those that came to York during the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, will know, they wandered around in the museum gardens. It's beautiful, isn't it? It's such a fantastic, and again, it's very different. So I don't know if we have different artists that are working on these, but almost I'm beginning to sort of see different kind of styles in some of these kind of details. So we've got very much like the wire of the beekeepers in here, haven't we? As well. So it makes you wonder if there's kind of 2 or 3 different artists, but that, you start to think, actually, I can tell who's done this, not by name, but I'm going to say, looking at these. But again, we've got both kind of like suggestions of roses, but also going back to suggestions of the crozier of the Archbishop. So, because when I saw this, I thought, oh, what if the Archbishop person did this and the beekeeper? Thank you, Linda. That's lovely. So yeah, so they nested just over here, and you could hear that. If you haven't heard their cry, you should definitely go on YouTube and kind of put it in and go, the call of the peacock, because it is so noisy. It's almost deafening. And what's fantastic as well is because they were here and they were free and they wandered around, the gate is just sort of over there. And they'd wander out into the roads. And regularly, I mean, obviously, I would say regularly, I mean, often more than once a day, they'd just wander out into the middle of the road and they'd just stand there, traffic would kind of stop, they'd sort of look around, they'd display their feathers, and then when they felt they'd kind of done their bit, they'd put their feathers back and they'd wander back in the garden, and kind of York would start again and the traffic would start again. But this was a daily occurrence. This wasn't anything out of the ordinary at all. This was called living with peacocks. And I think there was about maybe 10 in here when I was a kid. Obviously, over time, they began to die off and they were replaced. Gift from people of China, I believe, originally. So yeah, let's kind of move on, because we are near the bottom of the hour, and there's a few more. I hope we can just squeeze in on our kind of last wrap up. But I think you've done pretty well in the hour that we spent together. In seeing what we've seen, I know that there are a couple of, thank you, Cheryl, that's very kind of you. Anybody that's able to contribute, I do appreciate what's on here, or of course via PayPal or buy me a coffee. It still says send Humphrey a treat, which I know of course isn't no longer the case, but could I bring myself to take Humphrey's name for his picture? No, of course I couldn't. In the same way that it's so hard for us, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? To sort of delete people from our phone books when they've kind of passed on. So it's going to continue to say St Humphrey Treat. And so I hope that you know that that isn't any way me trying to exploit Humphrey's memory. Simply, it would just feel awful taking his name off. It seems too final. Or maybe I'm just not ready for it yet. Maybe I could do that next year. I don't know. But right now, I'm not ready to not have St Humphrey a treat, because in my mind, it's still kind of part of it. So, you know, there's a part of me, do you know what I mean, that he's still with. So consequently, I can't. Thank you, Marlene. That's lovely. Marlene sent me a coffee, so that's another way. So we've got, talking about praying and thinking about things, we have a lady. Thank you, Nathalie. Over here. But again, we've got a lady in holy orders. How do we know? Well, because, of course, she's got the cowl, but we look down here and we've got the cross. We've got the, by fidelity, we could do that, couldn't we? We've got the rosary beads. So, of course, these were used, weren't they, to kind of memorise sort of prayers. So, again, I think that this one is probably one of my favourites. There's obviously a yearning. I mean, hopefully that is obviously a yearning towards spirituality and to God, rather than anything earthly. But there's something very powerful in this one. We all loved Humphrey. Marlene, thank you for saying so. That you can't quite put your finger on. So express absolutely, Marlene. I think you're very on form today. You're being able to put into words a lot of what I'm thinking, isn't it? So clear, Linda. So again, let's go in and out. Let's just kind of go round a little bit. Use the light differently. But there's definitely something. Obviously, she's wearing. Let's appear to be wearing a veil. Is she wearing a veil? I don't know if she's wearing a veil actually. I think it's more to a head. Ow, God. Oh. So it's getting prickled by Holly there. But yeah, she's definitely. Or maybe that's what the grey lady looked like before she got herself in trouble, as you might say. Maybe that was the look that did it for her. But I like her an awful lot. A wimple. So let's try and see if we can't see a couple more, because I'm trying to get us finished pretty much on time. It's my kind of new discipline is to try and do tours that last an hour rather than tours that last an hour and 10, an hour and 40, or hour and whatever, because it's good to apply a bit of discipline to yourself, isn't it? From time to time, as long as it's not too much. And the next one, which may, of course, actually looking at the time, be our last for today. But don't forget, we haven't even seen 20 or 60 of these, so there are going to be more tours. So we always pop back to the gardens to pick up ones that we've missed. It isn't a case of that's that. It's a case of that's that for today. And of course, you have places to be, other tours to go on, and so forth. But thank you for being here today. If if you're not subscribed to my channel already, Explore Yorkshire, do that. And then also, if I get a chance, I'm going to go over to Pickering tomorrow for a Forties weekend. Like a wartime thing, lots of dressing up in vehicles. I'm not sure if I'll get time. If I can, I will. But I won't know until the morning because I've got stuff to do. Thank you. I'm buying that for Marlene. That's good. We'll add that to your property portfolio. And we've got another one. Ah, there it is. So if you think that in working out this route I've been pretty cunning, you'd have to say, was I as cunning as this chap over here? Thank you, Nathalie. It's lovely as ever to have you join us from the Netherlands. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. So here we go. It is the vulpine form. The fox, and of course the urban fox is, well, it's just part of life now. We see foxes maybe about at least once a week, I would say, wandering around in the area. And of course foxes, what they've learned is it's an awful lot easier to live off human rubbish, burger wrappers and bits of leftover takeaways, than it is to go hunting animals. So consequently, they've become very much resident in our neighbourhoods, whether those are urban, suburban, but increasingly less so from the countryside. So there we go. I've just heard the chimes of the clock telling us that 5 o'clock has been reached. I can't believe how quickly that has come, but I can wish you the very, very best. I do hope that you've enjoyed our time together, and that, as ever, these sculptures, in their own little way, have left an impression on you. They always do on me, for reasons that I can't quite put my finger on. They just talk to me, and I think that they are a spectacular bit, and I think it just shows that art doesn't have to be pretentious, doesn't have to be difficult or challenging. It doesn't even have to have any narrative. You can put your own upon it. Somebody else can come along and tell a different story that I did, and that's the beautiful thing about these sculptures. So credit to Make It York and to the York Bid for sorting this out yet again. And I look forward to giving part 2 of this tour, when we'll bring in some other parts of York, more gardens, more ghosts. So until then, I'm going to say bye-bye. So from York, thank you very much, and we'll see you all very, very soon. Bye-bye.